Thank you for joining us. Now, on November 11, 1998, the then head of state, General Abdulsalami Abubakar, who was going to hand power over to a democratically elected president, inaugurated the Constitution Debate Coordinating Committee to collate views and recommendations from the public through town hall meetings. The members of the committees were civilians, led by the late Justice Kiki Toby. They held town hall meetings in selected states and came to a conclusion that the country would go for the 1979 Constitution while making adjustments where necessary. Some say that what we now have is pretty much the 1979 Constitution as amended in 1999. Now, various issues have been flagged on this all-important document, ranging from the distribution of power seeming more unitary than federal, the loopholes that allow for corruption, antiquated concepts, and the likes. There has been a clamor for an amendment in some quarters, while others have asked for a completely new constitution. Recently, the Senate Committee on the Review of the 1999 Constitution said May 26 and 27, 2021 as dates for zonal public hearings on a review. Today on the Debrief, we assess the 1999 Constitution, analyze what works and what doesn't, and we look at how we can get the best possible solution that will steer Nigeria in the direction of growth and effective structure, respect for human rights, and most importantly, peace. To have this conversation with me are two renowned legal practitioners and human rights activists. I'm talking about Dele Farotimi, who is an author, a political activist who has been quite vocal about his thoughts on the 1999 Constitution. We also have Inibehe Efyong, a lawyer whose track record bears witness to a dedication to social and political order. My name is Felicity Eziwike. I certainly can't wait to get this conversation started. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Ini, how are you doing, Ross?
Good to have you both. Okay, so to you that's watching, please remember you can join the conversation using the hashtag #NCDebrief. Let's start from you, Dele. You have been quite vocal about the need to create a new constitution, but you know that laws are dynamic, and even if a near-perfect constitution is written today, there will always be loopholes and, in time, require adjustment. So why not amend?
If we all understood clearly exactly what a constitution is, nobody labeled a Nigerian today would accept the validity of what we call the 1999 Constitution. In your introductory remarks, you spoke of the consultations or the charade of consultation, the elite consensus and arguments that preceded Decree 24 of 1999, which is fraudulently referred to as the 1999 Constitution. As part of that consultation, you also said there was an agreement that they should have something pretty close to the 1979 Constitution. Now, that puts you back exactly where you are today. Every time you seek to build on top of a fraud, you always end up with failure. The foundation of a house, of every house, determines its stability. The 1999 Constitution is the perfection of the fraud that was the 1979 Constitution. And any amendment of the 1999 Constitution, or shall I say review of the 1999 Constitution, constitutes nothing but a further attempt at perfection of a fraud, and it will eventually collapse. Let us be clear about this. A constitution is essentially an expression of the will of the people, who by that expression confirms their citizenship. When the right to so express themselves is violently taken away, by violent men who were constitutionally charged with the duty of protecting the territorial integrity of the state, men taught to kill, trained to kill under the auspices of the state, captured the state and began to remake the state in their own image. The first expression of that attempt at fraudulence was the 1979 Constitution, which is itself, I believe, is Decree 103, if my memory serves me right. But it was also a decree because it is not what was presented by the Constituent Assembly that became the Constitution. Obasanjo and his coterie of crooks who were in the Armed Force Ruling Council or whatever they called them, I think they called themselves a Revolutionary Council. They were the ones who imposed their will on the Nigerian people. Let us be clear. The imposition of that will is the same prerogative that the military exercised after the 1993 election that should have brought MKO Abiola to power. The exercise of that prerogative led to the death of the usurper. And at the end of his death, the military, in negotiating his exit, went back to the original fraud of 1979.
All right, I think you've given us, sorry to interrupt you, you've given us a bit of a background as to the situation that was and what we have today. Then again, before I come to you, Effiong, I want to just stay with you for a bit, Dele. We know that the Constitution is flawed in many ways, and there is a clamor for citizen-controlled process. That Constitution that you are so against was, put together by civilians. There was no military personnel in that committee.
No. I think there is, you have a complete misunderstanding of the process that threw up the Constitution that you speak of. If it were to have come out of the will of the Nigerian people, it wouldn't have ended up as a decree. Like I just told you, it is a decree, Decree 24 of 1999.
Okay.
Now,
I'm sorry to keep interrupting you. I just needed to get your thoughts on that quickly. Let's come to you now, Mr. Effiong. While there is a clamor for a new constitution, there is also one for restructuring, which I may add seems to defy a unified definition. Which of these should take precedence and get the backing of Nigerians now? Because some say this seems to be two different issues.
Not necessarily, but I must say that the clamor for a new constitution is not a recent thing. It has been an ongoing agitation, decades after decades. Nigerians of diverse background have been clamoring, have been agitating, have been protesting, have been demanding that there is a need to return to the fundamentals, that there is a need to go back to the roots, to the very foundation of that document that is supposed to be the binding legal document, the document that establishes the Nigerian state, a document that defines who a citizen is, and a document that sets out the structure and, of course, the governance mechanism of the country. Now, people are talking about restructuring, which more or less is basically, devolution of powers and responsibilities. Some say, well, which should come first? But do not forget that even the current party, the current government, the Buhari and the APC-led regime, during the 2015 election, the APC had made it as a core of its electoral promises the need to restructure the country. But now they are pretending that they don't know what they meant by restructuring. They are pretending that they don't even know what restructuring is about. They are even now openly and belligerently against any demand for restructuring.
All right, I'm sorry to interject, all right? I actually was looking for what you think about, because of course there will always be agitation against and for any clamor. What you think should take precedence at this time. But before we get your response, let's go on a quick break. We'll be right back. Do please stay with us. You're still watching The Debrief. My name is Felicity Ezewike. I still have my guests with me, Dele Faratimi and Inibehe Efyong. Okay, before we went on that break, Inbehe, you were talking about the restructuring and the new constitution. I'm asking you, which should take preference? If you could just say that quickly.
I'm not really sure if it is a question of preference. If you look at Section 9 of the Constitution, there is a constitutional procedure for altering or amending that constitution, which is what the National Assembly, as you said in your intro, is trying to do now. Now, will the National Assembly, in the process of the amendment, restructure the country? I'm not certain whether the extent to which they are willing to go. I do not think that these two competing interests are necessarily conflicting. I do agree, however, that having a new constitution is not going to come easily. So obviously, we may have to allow the constitutional amendment process to proceed for us to see what exactly the parliament wants to do. If we are going to have a new constitution, the starting point is to have a legal framework, meaning that two ways to go about it. One, the National Assembly can, by an act of parliament, amend the constitution to give a legal backing, a legal instrument to govern the process of having a new constitution, either by constituent assembly or a process that it has to be a process that is originated from the people. Alternatively, they can pass an act of the National Assembly, basically allowing for this to be done by way of referendum at the end of the constituent assembly, at the end of the drafting process. The people should be able to vote. But currently under the 1999 Constitution, which further shows how fraudulent that document is, we don't even have a provision for a referendum. It is absurd. You cannot have that kind of document in a very heterogeneous and diverse country like Nigeria, in a country that you want a federal system.
Okay, let's come back to you, Dele. Let me reference what Inibehe just said about the review process that the Senate has now embarked on. There will be a hearing, public hearing on Wednesday and Thursday. That's May 26 and 27 next week. He just highlighted some of the role of the legislators on this. Well, there are some groups who are suggesting that the exercise should be commuted to a process of creating a new constitution. What's your thinking on this? Is it something that you see this assembly as capable of?
I'm sure you already know the position I hold on this, but let me just, for the sake of posterity, record myself. See, Nigeria has only two choices before it. We're at a junction. There are only two roads. One of them says war. The other says revolution. That one that says revolution, people hear the word, maybe because fraudulent monkeys have taken that word and appropriated it severally, and it's taken on a violent connotation. It simply means a turnaround. Our situation is, people are trying to cure ringworm when you have leprosy. You are trying to, how do you restructure something that is fundamentally damaged? We are talking about a house that is built on defective foundations, fraudulent.
Okay, the network keeps interjecting. We'll come back to Dele in a bit as soon as the network improves. But let me go to you, Inibehe. There is one particular, we'll allow him finish his thought on that. But moving forward, because of time, let's look at the exclusive legislative list. This is one major bone of contention I'd like us to talk about. It has 68 items that shows areas where only the federal government can legislate on. Now, interference of states on matters therein can be declared null, void, and unconstitutional. Many have suggested that some of the items on that list should be on the concurrent or a residual list to enable the state and the local government to cater to the citizens more effectively. Adds to that, of course, the call for devolution and decentralization of power. What will that look like, basically, considering how delicate our unity is right now? Do you think that states are ready to handle things like, for instance, policing, elections, budgets, just to name a few.
I do agree with those who say that the exclusive list under Part 1 of the second schedule to the Constitution is excessive, is too broad. Many of the items on the exclusive list should be either in the concurrent list and shared between the federal and the state government, or left, in what is called the residuary list, which is actually an unwritten list. What is neither in the exclusive or the concurrent list is deemed to be residual and exclusive to the states. The challenge I have, however, is that governors of this country have shown time and time again that they are not even ready for the reforms that we are talking about. Look at local government, for example. Local governments have been left for states. Is there any state in Nigeria today that we can beat our hearts, our chest, and say has held a credible local government? The answer is no. Look at judicial autonomy. Look at legislative autonomy that currently the courts are on strike, parliamentary workers are on strike, because you have this set of emperors in the states who are not willing to subject themselves to the constitutional mechanism, to subject themselves to the rule of law. So the challenge I have is that we must find a way. If we are decongesting the exclusive list, we must decongest it in a manner that will promote the rule of law, in a manner that will promote democracy, and not just to make governors more autocratic, to make governors to be more authoritarian in their approach to power and decision making, which is what is currently at play.
All right, let's come back to you, Dele, quickly. If you can just complete your thoughts. I hope the network is better now. If you can just complete your thoughts in, say, a minute.
Well, the point I was seeking to make is the fact that the Nigerian Constitution of 1999 is incurably bad and cannot
Okay, I think the network has yanked him off again. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, the network went off a bit. If you could just go ahead.
Well, I was saying that the right to make constitutions belongs to citizens. The last time Nigerians were allowed to exercise that right was in 1963. It is not right that something that is so glaringly defective, they should continue to seek to amend it. You cannot get a cure for
Okay, we've lost him again. Let's come back to you, Inibe, quickly. Let's talk about the social contract and total citizen-led process to getting a new constitution. How will that work really in a highly polarized Nigeria?
The main challenge or the main factor that debilitates against what my brother Dele Farotimi is advocating for is that we have, this kleptomaniac and cancerous ruling class, ruling elite, who are interested in only their self-interest, in only, self-aggrandizement. For example, how are you going to convene that citizen-led process? You will still require a legal instrument. You still require some, some form of institutional mechanism for that to happen. For example, if we say, let us have a new constitution now, it's not going to be something that we say, oh, let everybody convene at the National Stadium in Abuja or at the Tesla Balogun Stadium in Lagos, or everybody should come together. No, it has to be trade constituent assembly. People have to be selected. I don't know the formula we are going to use, whether it will be ethnic based. I don't know what formula we are going to adopt, but people it has to be representative of the people. But the challenge is that you have currently a National Assembly that is intolerant to that process. You have a president that is opposed to that process. So we must find a way out of this.
Finding a way, like you say, is the way forward. Dele, the network is not being nice right now, is it? Okay, let's hear your thoughts quickly. We're almost out of time. If you could just...
I really don't know what I don't know what might be going on with the network. Maybe I've suddenly become of interest to the networks, but let me just put these on the table before it goes horrible again. Inibe has raised the point. He said, how do we get this process kicking? It cannot be beyond the capacity of 200 million Nigerians to engage their brains sufficiently to set in motion a process that exercises their fundamental rights as citizens and not as licensees of a bunch of self-interested people who have held all of us hostage for this long. Even in the absence of technology in the 1960s, it wasn't beyond Nigerians to organize a plebiscite by which the Midwestern region was created. How can it then be beyond our capacity in this age of technology to organize an expression of our will? If it is so difficult, why is it so impossible to go back to the last expression of our will, which was the 1963 Constitution? I do not believe for 1 second that anything credible can come out of the current process, because how you go about the business of negotiating with armed robbers and kidnappers who have guns on the table, even Inibe himself has just said it. You said the current National Assembly is intolerant to the process. So what are we supposed to do? Carry sacrifices on our heads and go and prostrate and beg them if we can't gather at the National Assembly or wherever it is required that we gather?
As much as I wish there was more time for us to really explore this line of conversation. As much as, yes, they seem intolerant, they do have a role to play in kickstarting the process. So shouldn't we use this avenue of this public hearing to actually push the conversation, like you, even though you don't seem to believe that they will do much, push the conversation to getting us a new constitution?
Let me say this. As at a couple of days back, there was an internal conversation, and there is an ongoing internal conversation in a number of organizations to which I belong. The mainstream thinking is that ignore this bunch of fraudulent people who are merely lying and pretending to want to. Look, Leo Tolstoy said something. He said, I sit on a man's back, riding him and making him carry me. And yet I assure him and everyone who cares to listen that I want to ease his pains. I'll even give him Panadol, any analgesic, but I'm not getting off his back. How do you amend a fraud that benefits you so that it then frees those who have been kept in bondage for your benefit?
Indeed, indeed.
So let's be clear. That process is dead ab initio.
All right.
It's not going to bring anything good.
But you both still hold the belief that there is hope and we can do it if we come together as citizens. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the Debrief.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And thank you for watching. It's been a pleasure. We hope this conversation continue and that Nigerians can make the best decision for their entity, basically. Thank you. My name is Felicity Zewiki. See you next time.